When you sent in your request to learn more about Tyranids, I have to admit, a shiver went down my spine. It's like asking to peek into the abyss, isn't it?
It's certainly a topic that captures the imagination, to say the least. They're a force unlike anything else in the galaxy, pushing the boundaries of what we consider alien.
The source material paints a pretty bleak picture. A ravenous extragalactic species traveling the universe, consuming everything in its path. It's the stuff of nightmares. What fascinates me is that they aren't driven by the usual motives we see with other species. It isn't conquest or domination. It's pure consumption.
Exactly. Their sole purpose is to devour biomass, fuel their reproduction, and evolve. They are the ultimate predator, existing on a scale we can barely grasp.
And that brings us to one of the most mind-boggling aspects of the Tyranids, the hive mind. This idea of a galaxy-spanning collective consciousness, controlling every single Tyranid. It's almost too much to wrap your head around.
The hive mind is a fascinating concept. It connects every Tyranid, from the smallest ripper to the monstrous hive tyrant, allowing them to act with incredible coordination and efficiency.
So if I understand correctly, taking down a single Tyranid warrior isn't really a victory, because there are millions more, all connected to this single controlling intelligence.
That's right. It's like trying to drain an ocean one drop at a time. Each individual Tyranid is merely an extension of the hive mind's will. But there are vulnerabilities. Like the synapse creatures, they act as conduits for the hive mind's control.
Okay, this is where things get interesting. The source material mentions synapse creatures like warriors and hive tyrants. Are they like officers in an army?
You could think of them that way. The hive mind exerts its control most effectively through these synapse creatures, disrupt that connection, and the lesser Tyranids become less coordinated, more erratic. It throws their entire strategy into disarray.
So targeting these synapse creatures is crucial. But the sheer number of Tyranids is overwhelming. Even if you disrupt the chain of command, wouldn't you still be facing a relentless tide of smaller creatures?
It's a valid concern. The Tyranid swarms are vast. But focusing firepower on the synapse creatures can buy you valuable time. You create pockets of chaos that can be exploited.
It's like cutting off the head of a hydra. You might still have multiple heads to deal with, but it throws the creature off balance.
Precisely. And it buys you precious time to regroup and strategize. But there's another aspect of the Tyranid invasion that's equally disturbing: the shadow and the warp.
That was something else that really struck me in the source material. It's described as a psychic phenomenon that precedes the hive fleets, essentially cutting off planets from any sort of reinforcements or communication. It sounds like psychological warfare on a galactic scale.
It's a weapon of terror and isolation. The shadow and the warp disrupts warp travel, which is how most interstellar communication and transportation occurs. It isolates worlds, leaving them vulnerable and alone.
It's like cutting the phone lines before breaking into a house. You isolate the target and ensure they can't call for help. But the shadow and the warp affects psychers the worst.
Right.
Yes, psychers are particularly susceptible. The shadow and the warp is a cacophony of alien thoughts and emotions. It can drive them mad, overwhelm their abilities, even turn their powers against them.
So they're being attacked on a physical and a psychic level. It's a multi-pronged assault designed to cripple their prey before the main attack even begins.
Exactly. They soften up their targets before delivering the killing blow. And when that blow comes, it's nothing short of a tidal wave of biological horror.
I'm guessing this is where the invasion process begins. The source material is a bit vague on the specifics, but I gather it's more than just a giant swarm descending upon a planet.
Well, it's far more intricate than that. They begin with subtle reconnaissance, lictors, stealthy creatures designed for infiltration, slip onto the planet.
So they're like scouts, gathering intelligence. Exactly. They assess defenses, identify weak points. They're followed by gene stealers, creatures that infiltrate the planet's society in a far more insidious way.
The gene stealer cults. Those were mentioned in the source material. They infiltrate societies, interbreed, and create hybrids that are loyal to the hive mind.
Precisely. These hybrids form cults, sowing chaos and discord, weakening the planet from within. By the time the main invasion force arrives, the planet is already primed for collapse.
It's a terrifyingly efficient strategy: subversion, disruption, and then a full-scale assault. And speaking of the assault, I have to ask about the Tyranid bioweapons. I mean, every single weapon is a living organism. That's just crazy.
It is a testament to their adaptability. Every weapon is grown from the biomatter of previous conquests. It's a horrifyingly efficient system. They literally turn their enemies into weapons.
The source material mentions spore mines and venom cannons. What other kinds of bioweapons do they have, and how do they use them in combat?
Their arsenal is vast and constantly evolving, but a few stand out, like the Barbed Strangler, a long-ranged bioweapon that fires barbed projectiles that latch onto their victims. These barbs inject toxins that liquefy the victim's insides. Imagine the horror of being pinned down by these things, knowing that each hit brings you closer to a gruesome death.
It's like something out of a nightmare. And what about close combat? What do they use when things get up close and personal?
That's where the Devourer comes in. It's essentially a living chainsaw, capable of tearing through flesh and bone with ease. Imagine swarms of Tyranids, each wielding these horrifying weapons. Charging into enemy lines, it would be absolute carnage.
It's almost too much to comprehend. The sheer scale of the threat, the relentless efficiency, it's no wonder they've consumed countless worlds.
And what's truly chilling is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the Tyranid threat. There are creatures out there that dwarf even the ones we've discussed so far.
That's a thought that sends shivers down my spine. But I'm definitely eager to hear more. Let's delve into some of the specific Tyranid creatures mentioned in the source material. They really are the stuff of nightmares, but there's something fascinating about them, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Each creature is a marvel of biological engineering, perfectly adapted to its role within the Hive fleet. Their diversity is as impressive as it is terrifying. Where would you like to begin? They're monstrous biotitans, or perhaps the stealthy, nightmarish lictors.
Let's start with the lictor. You mentioned it earlier as part of their initial reconnaissance. The source material highlighted its ability to blend seamlessly into its surroundings. Imagine something so well camouflaged that you don't even know it's there until it's too late.
They're ambush predators designed to infiltrate and assassinate. They can literally vanish from sight, appearing as a rock or a shadow one moment, and then striking with deadly speed the next. It's a psychological weapon as much as a physical one.
So not only are they facing a vast, coordinated army, but they're also being stalked by these invisible assassins. It's like something out of a horror movie.
The psychological impact is undeniable. Imagine the paranoia, the constant fear of being watched. That fear can cripple an army just as effectively as any weapon.
Okay, moving on to something a bit less subtle. The Moloch. This thing's like a subterranean nightmare bursting from the ground to swallow its prey whole.
The Moloch is a perfect example of the Tyranids' ability to exploit any environment. They bypass traditional defenses, creating chaos and disruption from below. Imagine a fortified bunker suddenly breached from beneath, with these monstrous creatures erupting into the heart of the defenses.
The ground itself becomes the enemy. You're never truly safe, even in the most fortified position.
Exactly. The Tyranids turn the battlefield into a living nightmare. They exploit every weakness, every blind spot.
The source material also mentioned the Trigon, which is even larger than the Moloch. It's described as a massive burrowing serpent.
The Trigon is a true behemoth, where the Moloch is focused on focus assault. The Trigon is all about brute force. It can tunnel through almost anything, disrupting enemy lines, creating breaches for smaller Tyranids to pour through.
So the Moloch is the scalpel, and the Trigon is the hammer.
An apt analogy, they work in tandem, each playing a crucial role in the Tyranid assault.
And then there are the Biotitans, and the source material really emphasized these, describing them as colossal creatures designed to rival the titans of other races.
The Biotitans are a testament to the Tyranids' ability to adapt and overcome any obstacle. They're living siege engines capable of leveling cities and crushing entire armies. Each one is a walking ecosystem armed with a variety of bioweapons.
They're like the Tyranid equivalent of a superweapon, except they're organic, constantly evolving, and terrifyingly intelligent.
And just as diverse, there are different types of biotitans, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Some are designed for close combat, while others are specialized for long-range bombardment.
It's an army built on adaptability and overwhelming force. They're like a force of nature, reshaping the battlefield to suit their needs.
And at the heart of this monstrous army is the Norn Queen.
The source material described it as the heart of the Hive fleet, constantly generating new bioforms to serve the Hive Mind. It's like the engine that drives their relentless expansion.
The Norn Queen is a biological marvel. It's responsible for the creation and evolution of all Tyranid creatures. It adapts to the enemy, constantly generating new bioforms to counter their defenses.
So they're not just attacking with brute force. They're learning, adapting, and evolving in real time. It's an evolutionary arms race. And the stakes are the survival of the galaxy.
The Norn Queen is a symbol of their adaptability. It's a chilling reminder that we're not just fighting an army, we're fighting an intelligence that's constantly learning, constantly improving.
It's almost too much to process the sheer scale, the complexity, the relentlessness. It's no wonder they've consumed countless worlds. But it also raises the question, what hope does the galaxy have against such a foe?
That's the million-credit question, isn't it? Facing a threat this vast, this adaptable, requires more than just brute force.
What do you mean?
Well, as we discussed earlier, disrupting the synapse, creatures can throw their attacks into disarray. It's not a solution, but it buys time.
Time to do what?
Time to learn to adapt, to develop new strategies. The Tyranids might be the ultimate predators, but they're not invincible. They have weaknesses that can be exploited.
Okay, so we disrupt their command structure,
Yeah.
exploit their weaknesses. What are some examples of those weaknesses? What are we looking for?
Think about it this way. Their strength lies in their unity, their coordination. But what happens when that unity is broken? When individual creatures are forced to act on their own?
But you say we need to turn their strengths against them?
Exactly. We need to find ways to isolate them, to force them to fight on our terms. And that's where understanding their individual creatures becomes crucial.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Let's delve into the tactical implications of some of these creatures. The source material mentioned a few others that caught my eye.
By all means, let's explore them. Which ones piqued your curiosity?
The Hive Guard, for one, they're described as living artillery pieces. And then there's the zoanthrope, which is a powerful psyker. How do they fit into the overall Tyranid strategy?
Excellent choices. Both are critical components of the Tyranid war machine. The Hive Guard is a long-range specialist. It sits back from the front lines and bombards enemy positions with incredible accuracy. It's a testament to their adaptability, showing they're not just about overwhelming close-quarters combat.
So they're capable of adapting to different combat scenarios. They're not just a mindless horde charging into battle.
Not at all. They have a level of tactical sophistication that many underestimate, and the zoanthrope exemplifies that it's a powerful psyker capable of unleashing devastating psychic attacks, but it's also a force multiplier.
What do you mean by force multiplier?
The zoanthrope can amplify the psychic powers of other Tyranids, making them even more deadly. It's like a living psychic amplifier boosting the power of the hive mind itself.
So it's not just about individual creatures. It's about how they work together, how they synergize within the hive mind. It's a complex, interconnected system.
Exactly. Each creature plays a role, and understanding those roles is crucial to developing effective counter-strategies.
This is really starting to paint a fascinating, albeit terrifying picture of the Tyranid threat. There's so much more than just a swarm of monsters. They're a force of nature, driven by an insatiable hunger and capable of adapting to any challenge.
And that's what makes them so dangerous. They force us to confront our own limitations, to think outside the box, to innovate and adapt if we hope to survive.
Okay. I think we need a moment to process all of this. The Tyranid threat is a lot to take in. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear more about some of the specific strategies that have been used against them. The source material hinted at a few, but I'm eager to get your insights.
I'd be happy to share what I know. There have been some remarkable acts of defiance against the Tyranids, showcasing the resilience and ingenuity of the galaxy's defenders.
The Tyranid threat is daunting. There's no doubt about that. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale and ferocity of their assaults. But as we've discussed, they're not invincible.
That's a crucial point. Understanding their weaknesses, their tactics, their vulnerabilities is the key to mounting an effective defense.
Let's delve into some of those counter strategies. The source material mentioned that focusing firepower on synapse creatures can disrupt the hive mind's control. Can you elaborate on how that works in practice?
Imagine a battlefield where thousands of Tyranids are surging forward, a seemingly unstoppable tide of claws and teeth. Now picture a small squad of elite soldiers, their weapons specifically designed to pierce the tough carapaces of hive tyrants and warriors. By targeting these synapse creatures, they create pockets of chaos, disrupting the flow of the assault.
So it's not about wiping out the entire swarm, which seems impossible, but about surgically removing these key nodes of control.
Precisely. It's about creating confusion, disrupting the enemy's coordination. It buys valuable time for other forces to regroup, to fortify their positions, to launch counterattacks.
But wouldn't focusing on these larger creatures leave you vulnerable to the sheer number of smaller Tyranids? I mean, they're still coming at you, claws snapping, teeth gnashing.
It's a delicate balance, a calculated risk. You need to prioritize targets, focus fire, and move quickly. Think of it like a surgeon performing a delicate operation. You're not hacking and slashing. You're making precise cuts, targeting vital organs.
And what about the shadow and the warp? Is there any way to counter that? It seems like an insurmountable obstacle, especially for psychers.
The shadow and the warp is a formidable weapon, but there are ways to mitigate its effects. Some factions, like the Imperium of Man, utilize powerful psychers known as astropaths to navigate the warp and maintain communication even under the most oppressive conditions.
So it's like having a beacon that can cut through the psychic fog.
In a way, yes. Astropaths are trained to withstand the horrors of the warp to maintain their focus even when bombarded with alien thoughts and emotions. They are the lifeline that connects the Imperium, allowing them to coordinate their defenses even when faced with the isolating effects of the shadow and the warp.
The source material also mentioned gene stealer cults. They seem particularly insidious, infiltrating and corrupting societies from within. How do you even begin to fight an enemy that's hidden within your own ranks?
The fight against gene stealer cults is a shadow war, fought in the dark corners of society. It requires vigilant suspicion and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truth that the enemy may be closer than you think. Organizations like the Ordo Hereticus, a branch of the Imperium's Inquisition, specialize in rooting out these cults, often resorting to brutal and uncompromising tactics.
It sounds like a terrifyingly difficult task, a constant battle against paranoia and suspicion. How do you even know who to trust when anyone could be a hybrid, a sleeper agent waiting to be activated?
It requires a level of dedication and ruthlessness that few possess. The Ordo Hereticus are often feared and reviled, but their role is vital in safeguarding the Imperium from these insidious threats. They are the guardians against the hidden enemy, the ones who stand watch in the shadow.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening, albeit quite unsettling. It's clear that the Tyranid threat is complex, multifaceted, and constantly evolving. But you've also highlighted the resilience and ingenuity of the galaxy's defenders. There's hope, even in the face of such overwhelming odds.
There is always hope. As long as there are those who are willing to fight, to adapt, to innovate, the Tyranids might be the ultimate predators. But they've also awakened something within the galaxy's defenders. They've forced us to confront our own limitations, to push the boundaries of what we thought possible.
So what does the future hold? What can you listening take away from this exploration of the Tyranid threat? If they're this relentless force consuming everything in their path, is there any way to stop them?
That, my friend, is the question that haunts the dreams of every sentient being in the galaxy, and it's a question that each of us must answer for ourselves. The Tyranids offer a stark choice: adapt or be consumed.
On that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the chilling world of the Tyranids. We leave you with this final thought. If you were faced with the encroaching swarm, knowing the horrors that await, how would you choose to face the inevitable? Would you stand and fight, or would you seek a different path? The choice, as always, is yours. Until next time, keep looking to the stars, but never forget the shadows that lurk within.